Hey everyone, and welcome to the 5 Bytes podcast. And now a roundup of this week's enterprise IT news highlights. Bleepycomputer.com has reported that Microsoft has pulled a buggy Windows 11 non-security preview update to investigate a known issue that triggers a 0x800-73712 error during installation. The problematic update is KB5079391, and it started rolling out last Thursday to Windows 11 24H2 and 25H2 systems with 29 changes, including Smart App Control and display improvements. The preview update also improved Windows Hello fingerprint reliability on some devices and Windows recovery environment stability when running 64-bit apps on ARM64 devices. That is, traditional x64 applications. On affected devices, customers are seeing errors saying that some update files are missing or have problems, and they'll try to download the update again later with that error code that I listed earlier. Microsoft has now stopped the rollout of that KB, but hasn't shared a timeline for when a fix will be available. On their part, Microsoft said, quote, rollout of this update is temporarily paused due to installation error 0x800-73712. To prevent additional impact while the issue is investigated, Microsoft has temporarily lifted the availability of this update. As a result, the update temporarily might not be offered through Windows Update. End quote. Well, the good news, I guess, is that this was with an optional cumulative update, and it's a non-security preview update, so it shouldn't impact enterprises. So hopefully this is a non-issue for people who are listening. In an update to a recent story covered on the podcast, Microsoft has now resolved a known issue that rendered the classic Outlook email client unusable for users who enable the Microsoft Teams meeting add-in. Microsoft said the bug has been resolved and that a fix is rolling out when Microsoft Teams version 26058.712.4527.9297. Man, those Teams versions are long. The rollout started on Monday the 30th, so this Monday, and it's possible you may already have the fix by the time you hear this. MacRumors.com has reported that the Terminal app in macOS has gotten a new behavior. When users attempt to paste into the terminal, a pop-up warning appears saying the paste has been blocked, with the message reading that your Mac has not been harmed. Scammers often encourage pasting text into terminal to try and harm your Mac or compromise your privacy. These instructions are commonly offered via websites, chat agents, apps, files, or a phone call. There is a paste anyway option if you do wish to proceed and pass this warning. So it's kind of like UAC. So it might be a bit jarring for those who are used to Macs and they're not used to so many kind of pop-up warnings. However, this is an attempt to protect unsuspecting users from themselves. And not to throw too much shade, but a lot of people who use Macs are maybe not that tech savvy. So this is probably a good thing. And hopefully people actually heed the message. Now, it's unlikely that people who are not tech savvy will go into the terminal all that much. So if they're going into it, it's because they're being instructed. So they're probably not going to see it as a nuisance. And hopefully when they see it that once that they're asked to go into the terminal, they actually stop and read the message. And it's not going to be a case of like message fatigue. This change could be seen in macOS Tahoe version 26.4, which was released last week. A security advisory relating to Citrix NetScaler and vulnerability CVE-2026-3055 was published last week. This one is described as a memory overread vulnerability. Now, Watchtower had a fun framing calling this a sequel and points out that sequels are never as good as the original. That is because, the reason why they say it's a sequel is because the type of vulnerability is the same as Citrix Bleed and Citrix Bleed 2, which I covered quite extensively on this podcast. But according to Citrix, this new vulnerability scores 9.3 on the severity scale, so 9.3 out of 10, and it affects NetScaler ADC and gateway versions before 14.1-26.x, The reason for the high severity is because unauthenticated remote attackers can exploit to steal sensitive information from ADC or gateway appliances configured as SAML identity providers. Citrix states they discovered the vulnerability as part of their own internal product security efforts and classified it as an insufficient input validation leading to memory overread, which are the words that got the attention in comparison with Citrix Bleed. Citrix recommends upgrading to a patched version. Now, I have a list of the patched versions, and usually I would cover all those, but I don't think I need to. Let's not waste each other's time here. I'll just provide a link to the story if you'd like to see a list of the patched versions available for yourself. And you can find that at 5bytespodcast.com for episode 433. And lastly, on this story, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, as I commonly call it on the podcast, ordered government agencies in the U.S. to patch their NetScaler appliances against this actively exploited vulnerability by Thursday. So quite an aggressive turnaround for them to get patched. And usually the CISA also suggests that, non-government agencies should also patch pretty urgently too. In a similar ballpark to NetScalers in terms of vendors, I guess at least, is F5, whose big IP APM devices have a vulnerability which was first classified as a denial of service vulnerability, but is now being reclassified as a critical severity remote code execution vulnerability. And they warned that attackers are exploiting it to deploy web shells on unpatched devices. BleepingComputer.com reports this vulnerability is tracked as CVE 2025 53521, and you'll obviously want to make sure that you are patched against the vulnerability in question, but customers are also advised to check their big IP systems disks, logs, and terminal history for signs of malicious activity. The US CISA also added the vulnerability to its list of actively exploited flaws last Friday and ordered federal agencies to secure their big IP APM systems by midnight on this past Monday. So if you're using F5 big IP APMs, heads up, get patched and secured, and also check your logs. The European Commission has confirmed a data breach after its Europa.eu web platform was hacked in a cyber attack claimed by the Shiny Hunters extortion gang. The Commission says the attack did not disrupt any Europa websites and that its staff took measures to contain the incident and prevent further data theft. In a press release, the European Commission stated, quote, "Early findings of our ongoing investigation suggest that data has been taken from those websites. The Commission is duly notifying the union entities who might have been affected by the incident. The Commission services are still investigating the full impact of the incident." While the Commission didn't share further information regarding the attack, the threat actor who claimed responsibility for the breach told BleepComputer.com last week that they had stolen over 350 gigs of data before their access was blocked, including multiple databases. Although they didn't share how they breached the Commission's Amazon AWS accounts, they provided screenshots proving that they had access to some European Commission employees' data. So it appears that this might have been another incident of a data breach that included attacking Amazon storage. The European Commission is in good company, however. The head of the FBI had some of his personal emails and media compromised recently, too. And although this was the Shiny Hunters extortion gang, I wouldn't be surprised if this is all due to the geopolitical situation and obviously European and US and probably Israeli entities and institutions are likely targets for these types of attacks. And although Shiny Hunters aren't necessarily like Iranian hacktivists, they may have like Iranian buyers for some of that information if it is interesting to them. So time for heightened security, although you look at the landscape of security over for the last few years, it should be heightened anyways, I guess. ControlUp announced a new product offering called DaaS IQ, promising that IT can cut costs and simplify management of cloud desktop environments with easy-to-use auto-scaling, spend intelligence, and host lifecycle management all in one place. They listed benefits such as a single purpose-built control plane designed for AVD that unifies everything in one place, easy to use auto scaling that replaces rigid schedules and manual time entry with a graphical weekly interface that allows you to configure or update power policies in just 3 clicks to map host pools to usage, ensuring consistent coverage without gaps. Also, full lifecycle management for AVD hosts that lets you drain, restart, and configure session hosts from one place. And also, you can have spend intelligence to quickly see exactly what your AVD environment is costing and where the waste is. My old buddy Trent Tai published a blog post on the feature, which offers an interesting insight into what differentiates it from competitors. I'm reading between the lines myself. I think it means Nerdio and possibly Hydra, although I don't have much experience with Hydra myself. But one difference that is pretty nice is there's no infrastructure setup required in your Azure tenant. So you're not paying for additional resources within your Azure tenant each month on top of licensing costs. The scaling feature on the surface looks pretty intuitive, but I can't say that I've used it. So it's just based off of this kind of press release and also some of the materials they published for the feature. It is interesting. It's certainly maybe not surprising that another vendor is kind of wading into this market because, you look at Nerdio, for example, who I'm sure are considered the market leaders. They get 100 million in funding. So, you're looking at that and you're going, huh, yeah, maybe maybe I should go for that market as well. And a lot of the functionality, I would say, for like scaling sets and the various features within AVD, just natively within the Azure UI, in my opinion, it's not very intuitive. You have to work around some of the limitations of the UI, but there are public APIs. So if you can do it and you can build your own UI, why not? It makes sense. And from what I've heard from people who use these kinds of solutions, even though they could potentially build out their own alternative and not have to pay a vendor for it, they actually prefer to pay a vendor in order to get support. And also just because they don't want to have to put the development effort in when there's some change made by Microsoft, for example. So, yeah, interesting, and best of luck to ControlUp. I think they're pretty well positioned because they've been in the game for many years. It is an era where data is gold, and they're already a vendor in the space dealing with a lot of data. So that data can certainly be used to enrich the experience in such a solution. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops. TechCrunch.com recently reported that OpenAI decided just last week to shut down Sora, which is its AI video generation tool. And this is just 6 months after releasing it to the public. The Wall Street Journal reckons the reason for its retirement is because it was a money pit that nobody was using, and keeping it alive was costing OpenAI the AI race. So, CEO Sam Altman reportedly made the call to kill Sora, free up compute, and refocus. Now, if you want to understand just how sudden this was, apparently Disney, per the Wall Street Journal, had just committed the $1 billion in the partnership, which I covered on this podcast. But they apparently only found out Sora was being shut down less than an hour before the public knew. It's said from TechCrunch.com that the deal died with it, which is pretty staggering if that is true. Now, this is Wall Street Journal and repeated by TechCrunch.com. Wow. Pretty staggering if that is the case. BleepComputer.com reported that vulnerabilities in the Vim and GNU Emacs text editors were discovered using simple prompts with Claude's assistant, and they allow remote code execution simply by opening a file. The assistant also created multiple versions in the research upon prompts of proof of concept exploits, refined them, and provided suggestions to address the security issues. So, another example of Claude or just even generative AI in general, finding vulnerabilities within products, but in this case, at least offering security advice around them. The Vim vulnerabilities were reportedly due to missing security checks and issues in mode line handling, allowing code embedded in a file to be executed upon opening. A patch was promptly released, and the vulnerability has not received a CVE, and it affects all versions of Vim 9.2.0271 and earlier. In the case of the GNU Emacs text editor, the vulnerability remains present as the developer considers the vulnerability Git's responsibility to address, as the scenario involves creating an archive like an email or a shared drive that contains a hidden .git slash directory with a config file pointing to an executable script. So hopefully Git steps up and provides a patch for that one, because it seems, at least from what they're claiming, is not a direct GNU Emac vulnerability. According to Reuters, Microsoft executives have in recent weeks told managers of major divisions, including its cloud unit and North American sales groups, to suspend new hiring. The information reported on Thursday cited 3 employees with direct knowledge of the decision. Executives told managers to halt the hiring of any new candidates who did not already have a job offer, citing the need to cut costs and boost margins. However, the freeze is not company-wide, and other divisions, including the group building Microsoft's Copilot AI tool, are still hiring, according to Reuters and also Yahoo.com. Somewhat related, Bloomberg reported last week that Microsoft stock was on track for its worst quarterly performance since the global financial crisis 2 decades ago. Well, almost 2 decades ago. They said 2 decades ago in the report. But they explained that Microsoft is doubling down on capital expenditure as Wall Street increasingly asks when investments in AI infrastructure will produce more dramatic payoffs in revenue growth. And a second concern for investors are selling software stocks over fears that AI startups like Anthropic and OpenAI are creating agents that can replace products made by companies like Microsoft. The stock was down 25% in the first quarter of this year, on pace for its biggest loss since its 27% drop in the fourth quarter of 2008. It's by far the weakest performer amongst the 7 tech giants at the start of the year, with an index tracking the group falling 14% over that time. Microsoft fell 1.7% after the market opened just last Friday, putting it on track for a 4th straight session in the red. So yeah, certainly, I mean, it's a disruptive time. I think I was reporting probably even a year ago on the fact that a lot of economists were concerned that this whole AI technology was a bubble. And while, yeah, there's definitely benefits and amazing innovation happening around AI, there is a massive risk for vendors too. And it seems like Microsoft is maybe feeling some of the blowback from those risks and people wanting, well, I wasn't going to say instant gratification because it's not instant. This AI investment's been going on for several years now, but they want some sort of gratification. What won't help this situation is a recent Omnissa State of Digital Workspace report that states Windows 11 users experienced 3.1 times more forced shutdowns than Mac users. In addition, Windows users experience 7.5 times more app freezes and 2.2 times more app crashes. This is where the app needs to be restarted. And that's compared to obviously Mac users, as I'm alluding to. And this is according to new telemetry data collected from Omnissa's enterprise clients in sectors like retail, healthcare, education, finance, and governments during 2025. The firm's report also indicates that Macs showed more longevity in an enterprise context, which may be a little bit odd. I don't know. Um, all depends on the reporting. But 9 out of 10 Windows machines in fleets of managed devices were under 3 years old, and only 2% were over 5 years old. Meanwhile, 65% of Macs were less than 3 years old, and 11.5% were over 5 years old. Now, that could have more to do with budgeting and who gets Macs in organizations compared to general PCs. I don't know. I think you need to read between the lines of this report a little bit, in my opinion. But Apple also came in ahead when it came to its users installing regular updates. Omnissa found macOS devices were updated 1.5 times faster than Windows hardware, and iOS devices on average get updated 8.1 times faster than Android ones. The vendor chalked this up to Apple controlling the entire update stack as opposed to Android, where updates are likely fragmented across diverse manufacturers and device types. And I'd be interested to see if that will improve with Windows devices going forward with the upcoming changes to how Windows updates will be handled. Um, yeah, again, I think there's a lot more context to be applied to the differences between Windows and Macs, especially in the enterprise. So I would take some of this with a pinch of salt. But obviously, as reported on many episodes of the podcast, there are some prevailing quality concerns in Microsoft in general. And this is not going to make those matters any better. Finally, in the news for this week, the Register has reported that ServiceNow is allegedly refusing to pay one of their salesmen a commission on more than $27 million in sales, telling the 13-year veteran of the company that he overperformed his quota, insisting that instead he signed paperwork that retroactively reduces the commission amount, according to a federal lawsuit filed by the salesperson in question. ServiceNow has denied all the claims. And yeah, some of the figures are pretty staggering, at least in my opinion. So it's suggested or reported here by the Register that ServiceNow originally consistently paid his commissions, but all that changed in September 2024 when he closed a $7.3 million deal with a federal customer. Rather than pay the $236,845 that he was owed on that deal, Costa says his supervisor asked him to sign paperwork that would retroactively raise his quota to a higher dollar figure, which would eliminate many of the incentives that had fattened the commission he would otherwise be entitled to. In August 2025, the Costa again closed a massive federal deal, this time for $20 million, which under the terms of his compensation plan for 2025 would have entitled him to $144,142, and he was again told the commission was too large. The sales operations manager placed a hold on his payment, telling Costa's supervisor via email that he had overperformed and should sign a retroactive deal that doubled his target in order to reduce the amount of the commission. Costa refused to sign the paperwork both times, and as a result, ServiceNow has now nullified his commissions for those deals, according to the filing. So, pretty staggering, but also, I think, in present day, maybe not all that surprising. It seems over the last few years, particularly in tech, sales roles and similar roles have been decimated in the layoffs. So I'm sure vendors are very much aware of this, and they're putting the squeeze on their salespeople and maybe doing underhanded things. Now, this is all alleged by the salesperson, I have to say. As stated, ServiceNow has denied all these claims. So I guess we'll have to see how it shakes out in the trial. But now, this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. One to cover this week, and it was shared by WindowsCentral.com. They had an article on 9 meaningful Windows 11 improvements this year. So it goes into some features that I would have reported on the podcast, but others not. And they suggest that it's improving the overall experience and quality of Windows 11 from a user experience perspective. So if you're interested in checking it out, maybe to see what are some of those incremental improvements to Windows 11, I'll share a link with this episode, which again is episode 433, and you can find that over at 5bytespodcast.com. But as always, thank you so much for listening.